jump right into it. Are you moderating?
Yeah, I'm moderating. We'll earn it today. So thank you guys very much for coming out. Director of Athletics Graham Neff here to provide a bunch of background in terms of what we've got going on in athletics, some upcoming initiatives that we have, and then just kind of an opportunity to reflect and then take some questions. So with that, we'll leave it to Graham to start with an opening statement.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate. I really appreciate everyone being here. I know it's an off day for fall camp. You guys have been grinding like a lot of everybody else in the building, and so appreciate the off day off the field and just sitting and chatting. And we're chatting obviously bigger picture here and just industry and Clemson athletics, all things. And so appreciate you guys this time of year in particular. And then certainly for me, usually having this balance in August and just kind of level set as we get into the year and a little bit of a look back and look ahead, which are what some of my notes are, and I presume our conversation. So I do have a handful of bullet points that I'll run through, given admittedly it's been a little bit of time. I know at our July board meeting, we had a lot of actions that I wanted to talk through and address, but we just didn't necessarily carve out the time for me to sit and chat. So I want to recap a bit just with some of my opening remarks, and then certainly we'll take everyone's lead on where we go from there. Certainly as a look back from the past year, the athletic success, academic success, changing environment of college athletics has never been more dynamic, and our assertive posture in that remains consistent. I know I've been consistent in talking about how we view the athletics department with that, but all that's fundamental with keeping the main thing, to use one of Coach Sweeney's phrases, from an academic standpoint. And so the success of our student athletes in the classroom, which is supported via from IPTAY with scholarships and academic support, has never been better. A 97% academic success rate across all of our teams is top in the country from a public school Power 5 standpoint. And even specifically with football, the 99% GSR is a record-setting number for college football programs. So that's been a hallmark of our student athletes over the years. And so as much as the competitive success is incredibly important, starting with the main thing and the success and support of our student athletes in the classroom is a non-negotiable, and quite frankly, couldn't be more proud of their work and achievements. On the fields, certainly an incredible year. 2 years ago, or I guess a year ago, when we were looking back on that prior year, we were coming off of 4 ACC championships. Was the first time that had been done at Clemson in 23 years. This past year, we had 4 teams advance to final 8s or elite 8s or quarterfinals of their sports, between men's soccer, obviously winning a national championship their second 3 years, women's soccer advancing to their first ever College Cup, women's golf advancing to the quarterfinals of match play, and then men's basketball advancing to the Elite 8. So first time Clemson has had 4 teams advance to the Elite 8s, so to speak, in their postseason play for the first time since 1980. So that type of competitive achievement has been really remarkable, and a testament to our student athletes and coaching staffs. Certainly beyond that, in the support and the in venues, record-setting year also from a support and an attendance and a ticket sales, and there's certainly business components to that are very important. For the first time ever, we had over 1,000 fans cumulatively in all of our venues. 1,000, I misspoke. 1 million fans. If we had 1,000, that would be probably some problems. 1 million fans, over 1 million fans throughout all of our venues. First time ever. So that engagement, that really what athletics brings to the university, the community, and then the environment that creates, obviously for our student athletes, is just incredible. And the tangency and the support with IPTAY. Record-setting year earlier this week, I believe it was. We released our year-end figures of $79 million of funds raised and donors supported and committed. So that success of IPTAY and how that supports scholarships and academic support is, again, second to none. Today is also the 90th anniversary of IPTAY. Started in 1934, Rupert Fike, and so we're going to celebrate that today, let alone this year ahead with the 90th anniversary. Never been more important for us to generate revenues. I'll talk on more of that in a second, but the fundamentals of IPTAY and donor philanthropy and scholarships remain core, and something that Clemson and IPTAY do better than anybody. This is also, this upcoming year, is our 50th anniversary of women's sports at Clemson. So our first 4 sports started in 1974, women's basketball, women's tennis, women's fencing, and women's swimming. So this is our 50th year of women's sports here at Clemson, and obviously the two teams, women's tennis and women's basketball, are team 50s, so to speak. But we're going to celebrate the anniversary, and we have a campaign from a fundraising standpoint of Hear Her Roar. We also have a celebration campaign of She Will Triumph, taking a cue off of the alma mater that we'll celebrate in all of our venues and sports, men and women, throughout the year. Certainly it's tangent to all of the success and opportunities nationally in women's sports, and then certainly Clemson, how we have added 2 new women's sports now. Feels like old hat with lacrosse and gymnastics. We were talking for so long of the startup of those sports and the launch, and now that we have some look back of gymnastics and lacrosse in year 1 and 2 respectively, it's really, really incredible, that type of investment and performance. And lastly, the opening last fall of our women's sports performance complex, our women's sports expansion complex, gymnastics and lacrosse, is an incredible facility. And then we are under construction. Many of you drove by it and have difficulty with parking, et cetera, because of it. But the expansion, the renovation of Jervey and Jervey Gym, but the addition of the Watt Family Performance and Wellness Center, which is really a day-to-day high-impact facility for all of our student athletes, but namely our Olympic sports student athletes in sports, 18 of our 21 programs. The volleyball component of that will be open here in the coming weeks for our home volleyball season this year. And then the balance of the new build, the sports performance component, will be opened early part of 2025, spring of 2025. So, buoyed from the success of our teams on the field, and this is going back to my initial reference of our actions in July at our Board of Trustees meeting. Couldn't be more excited to move forward the contracts and commitments to the coaches that we did there, Coach Brownell, Coach Bakich, Coach Noonan, Coach Radwanski, and Coach Hester. Were all negotiated, but then supported by our Board of Trustees and approved, as this group knows, and we ran those through. But just to speak on that, the strategy, but really the commitment of them, really, really important. The stable of our coaches. We have 21 sports at Clemson, 16 head coaches. I've just recounted some of the successes this past year and year prior. But for my role, that support, connectivity, relationship, commitment, proactivity, quite frankly, with all of our coaches and those 5 that we moved forward with this past summer is incredibly important, right? And they all have different stories to them, and very intentional about my engagement with all of our coaches, but in particular the contractual matters, which are important, right? And so those actions, again, I thought were just a testament to those coaches and the fits here at Clemson and how they lead their programs specifically. Never been a more dynamic time in college athletics, as I've referenced. The codependency of all of the moving parts, NIL, right, transfer portal, house case. I look forward to talking on transfer rules. Transfer portal talked about revenue sharing, college football playoff expansion, right? It's finally here, 2024. We've been talking about playoff expansion for quite some time. So now that we're in the operational mode of that, and the opportunity for Clemson to compete and be playoff ready from a hosting standpoint, certainly, of course, let alone as that looks like for the season, and Coach Sweeney starting camp, and he had a bit of a different cadence with that, just for him to forecast and project to a different type of season and structure and perhaps elongation. And so all of those moving parts within football that have connectivity to the broader landscape has never been more dynamic, and has never been more of a priority for Clemson Athletics, and ultimately my role to continue to position us for that. The alignment, we talk about it a lot, and we're going to continue to, just with President Clements and his role in leadership of the university, certainly his role and emphasis and support and understanding, I could go on, in athletics is renowned. And then how that works up through our Board of Trustees, of course, and their time and attention and education and prioritization around athletics and college athletics, and Clemson's position in it as an athletics department, but more so as an institution, couldn't be more aligned and true and important at this day and time, so to speak. To that end, as we continue to navigate all the changing collegiate athletics model, again, a lot of those elements that I just referenced, never been more important for us to continue to generate revenue. And there's the focus pieces of IPTAY that I talk about, and certainly our ticket sales and the traditional aspect, so to speak, of college athletics business and finance and revenue generation. But it's incumbent on us to continue to move the needle and to think creatively and do that in different ways. And so one of the things that we have launched today, or Jeff, we have, or you're handed out, and we'll have more, happy to speak to it, and more emphasis on us launching Clemson Ventures, which is an entity that we've recreated around revenue generation strategies. Really unique here at Clemson. We're one of a few schools, less than a few schools probably in the country, that we own our assets, so to speak, our IP, our multimedia rights. We've done that in-house, so to speak, for the last 3 years with an affiliated organization called CAPCO, Clemson Athletic Properties. It's been incredibly successful from a revenue generation and an internal strategy to Clemson. The structure of CAPCO is unique and very intentional, how it affiliates with the university. This rollout of Clemson Ventures is a next step, is a 2.0, so to speak, of that strategy of our commercial interface from the business community and revenue generation, and how we align more of our assets to create revenue opportunities for Clemson Athletics. But also uniquely, and this is very intentionally part of the strategy of how that interfaces from a future model for our student athletes and NIL, and as we talk on house case and the opportunity to continue to position and create resources for our student athletes for NIL opportunities, and how we can build staff and create agency type strategy within Clemson Ventures is absolutely a tact that has been under development for quite some time here this spring and summer. The launch of that, the rollout of that today is very important. It's a big deal, and we're going to talk more on that, and our student athletes and coaches and staff will come to enjoying that as we grow it and roll it out. And again, it's done tactfully because of the strategy here internally with Clemson and the assets that we own, but also as we it's even more incumbent on us to generate revenues, position ourselves as an athletics department within the changing collegiate landscape, and ultimately support our student athletes with resources to the department for our support of them, but also from an NIL standpoint, directly with them, which we are able to do, and we anticipate that to be even more focused and acute for the years ahead. So that's a lot of opening comments. I don't know if there's an over-under on Sweeney often has opening comments that are elongate, but I wanted to make sure I'm covering a lot of the landscape, given the time and your focus here, but with all the moving parts and things going on in athletics. So I'll pause there, Jeff, and however we look to dialogue from here.
So staying with the Clemson Ventures, is that something that you were thinking of before H4957? Is that something that it was after? Kind of how did that all position itself when McMaster signed that in back in May?
That's right. Before, David. And listen, I think it's a coalescence of the strategy that we've had for the last couple of years with CAPCO, again, our in-house rights that we bring to market and engage throughout the university, quite frankly, meaning assets and student opportunities and internships, right? We were able to uniquely do that internally. So there's been a natural progression of, hey, let's take a next step there to grow the staff and the scope, coupled with changing landscape, right? House case, revenue share, therefore revenue generation, and how do we continue to get creative and look to the private sector, the professional sector for how they structure and monetize, but then how do we pull that forward here to Clemson and still keep the collegiate model that's unique to higher education or Clemson Athletics, but do it in a much more strategic way. So the answer to your question is before maybe the governance changes from an NCAA or a state law standpoint, but that is certainly, those changes certainly give us even more flexibility to be aggressive in this space.
Hey, Graham.
Pete.
In no way, I mean, Dabo would just be getting warmed up at this point. You know,
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Not even close. But with a lot of what we heard about, or a lot of what we've heard on the House settlement so far is how it's suddenly going to shrink available money and the planning that goes into it. Yet this summer, there's construction going on outside. You know, a bunch of your coaches got raises and things like that. How do you balance all that? Is it going to be harder to make those kind of decisions going forward once this House settlement kicks in?
Well framed, Pete. And yeah, it's going to be more complex, right? And I would tell you within circles of ADs and our conference and just colleagues around the country, right, we're all trying to look to how do we reprioritize, find efficiencies, redeploy our capital, so to speak, from just a business sector mindset. And you're right. Like, listen, we're going to continue our posture is going to continue to invest. And that means coaches. We just ran through those, and we're going to continue to leverage certainly revenue generating activities, investments, sports programs, right? There's a business strategy to that we're going to continue to and be reactive to the market. Maybe is not the best phrase, but recognizing and aggressive within the market. That's going to continue to shift. And sure, that means coaches. That means facilities and footprint and how your operations are. So you're right, and we're going to continue to build. But there's a redeployment, and I would, to be honest, there's plenty of facilities on our to-do list that probably have a little bit of a different timeline with them now. While there's still going to be investment and development of facilities and retention of coaches and key revenue initiatives. So the answer is yes, much more complex, and it's so interesting that we're in this transitory period, right? Because now we have pretty good direction with where the House settlement is headed and some of the construct around it. But the quintessential building the plane while we fly it as an industry, let alone local decisions, part of your point, there's still so much uncertainty around the implementation details, any adjustments legally or from the settlement articulation. So, but listen, we've been very engaged with all 16 of our coaches and in educating and equipping them with, here's our understanding of it. Our phrase that we've been using is, in the absence of certainty, right? There's not a whole lot certain right now in college athletics, house case or otherwise. But for us, administratively, in my role, to provide as much clarity as possible. That means transparency with our coaches, with our student athletes, with our staff, with our community, right, in IPTAY, et cetera. So that balance is kind of how we think about it, and while we're going to be redeploying priorities and investments.
You mentioned about IPTAY and their annual and setting a record and all that, but obviously that's with scholarships and that stuff. How do you educate the IPTAY people why it's so important future to other ventures, as you mentioned, you're putting out there, that they continue to give to the athletic department in a different way? How is that message going, and what is the plan for that message?
Yeah, well said. We're just getting into fall giving year, right? And now tickets and parking, and so we're kind of off and running into the year ahead. And so a lot of that marketing and messaging is to come, so to speak. That being said, listen, within a house case, here's how we talk about house case, maybe strategy or build. And I'll try to articulate it my mind's eye here from a pyramid standpoint, right? And really three components of house case: expanded scholarships or deregulated scholarships. We can provide more scholarships to all of our sports and student athletes. There's the revenue share component, right? And then there's still NIL on top of that, and what's the enforcement and mechanisms around it. And so we intend to, and we are working to be able to invest heavily in all three of those areas. And again, Clemson Ventures is a component to the revenue generation, but even particularly the NIL agency aspect. That being said, back to your question, from our IPTAY supporters and 22,000 plus donors, the foundation of this pillar, this is still higher education. It's scholastic in nature. It's scholarships. It's the support, the academic support, nutrition, personal development, programming. That remains foundational, and that's going to affect all 21 of our sports, 600 student athletes. And because of the house case, that foundation is able to be wider. We're able to offer more scholarships. 11.7 is a number that this group well knows, Henny, Will, with baseball. And so now, right, a year from now, we anticipate, or the direction is that in baseball in particular, right, 34 scholarships. And again, you extrapolate that amongst all of our 21 sports. And so that is that is not revenue share. That is not NIL. That's scholarships. That's real foundational in nature. And that is something that Clemson has been great at, and IPTAY for 90 years has been great at the support of that. And so now we're going to continue to leverage and invest at that foundation of that pyramid. And so that affects, and so that's the message, and we'll answer your question, that, hey, IPTAY and donors and supporters, we need you now more than ever, because the bottom of this pyramid can be wider, and we want it to be a really wide, underpinned base. And now layer up of the pyramid, so to speak, is revenue share, and how we look to invest that. And that's now allowable, so to speak, or will be from a House case. And we need to be fully invested. We intend to be fully invested and strategic about the deployment of revenue share opportunities. And then again, beyond that, the top of the pyramid, so to speak, is NIL opportunities. And so again, back to Clemson Ventures, NIL agency, and NIL is going to remain very, very important in the future changed collegiate model. It's all underpinned, back to your question, Will, of education, scholastic nature, financial aid, scholarship support for our student athletes.
I guess if you've gotten the sense, like obviously Dabo's kind of disappointed in terms of maybe the walk-on component in football might go away. Do you have a sense that you'll need to go to a full 105 full scholarships to be competitive, or is there a chance that there could be partials in that roster? Have you discussed that with him? Maybe an idea of that?
Very much so, John. That it couldn't be more active conversation within the industry, sure, and certainly for Coach and I, kind of when started getting a sense of the direction of the House case settlement in numbers, and again the change of scholarship limit removal, but roster limit creations, and then what that looked like for football. I probably made the mistake to have an hour with Coach Sweeney very early on. I feel like he was one of the first coaches that we kind of had this, let's talk on the realities of where maybe this is headed. So he and I had an hour, I think, mutually blocked off on my calendar, and 2.5 hours later, I was late for a staff meeting, and we were, chopping it all up. So that was my mistake. I'm better than that with him. But that being said, yes, is very active. To answer your question, hey, 105, certainly the full resources of scholarships for 105 or wherever the number may land is our intention and support for football. How exactly Coach looks to deploy that or transition into that and balance current roster with recruiting and quite frankly, part of the difficulty and the uncertainty of the number and the how do you scholarship it is the transition time. Right, because we all know that football seasonally, and this really affects all of our fall sports, soccer, volleyball, that their seasons end in the fall semester by and large, and that's where a lot of their roster changes happen, whether that's transfer portal windows or at that point, certainly high school signings, and in football, often, obviously a lot of them enroll early in January. But at this point, we project, or as we learn more information from the House case, that still in January, that number may be 85, but that number might not tick up to 105 or whatever the number may be, until later on or maybe next academic year. So there's a timing, strategy and uncertainty with it, and that is also laced, John, with your question of, hey, exactly how much do you jump into it, or do you do the full 105? A lot of questions, but a very active engagement for Coach and I, sure, but then certainly our staff and football management, let alone the rest of our sports. This has implications too as well.
It's the first time we've talked to you since Clemson sued the ACC. Just what you can say about that, and how has that impacted, if at all, your working relationship with Jim Phillips or in these conference meetings and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's right, Chappell, and you've been very engaged and present in some of the legal proceedings. You can certainly respect, right? There's not a whole lot of in-depth I can go there. We'll let the court process play out, and our legal team continue to lead that strategy. To the second part of your question, and Commissioner Phillips, I thought, had some really appropriate and shared perspective and comments at Football Media Days in July about his lens on just the professional nature of the relationships and what his role is and what athletic directors' roles are, or my role is. And so we're going to continue to act, and I couldn't have felt more supported from his chair in the day-to-day, right, and with my certainly colleagues around the ACC table, so to speak. And I've been real consistent with our staff and our coaches and our student athletes about the expectations for us to be great members of the conference we're in. I know that's been a message point of mine that I have been and will remain consistent on. And that means big picture of how we're positioning and strategizing for Clemson in a fluid, dynamic environment, but also day to day, right? And how we compete and how we are professional in the settings and circles that we're all in variously. And so the consistency, I guess I'm reciprocating maybe some of Commissioner Phillips' comments on the professionalization of it or professional nature of it, but also for us to continue to do what's best for Clemson. Which is leveraging which is shown by our strategy to continue to be able to navigate in the changing landscape.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, how do you feel about that success initiative that Phillips talked about during the summer?
Yeah, it was rolled out last fall, I believe it was, and certainly there was a lot of work that went into that for the months and years preceding. An innovative, a forward-moving approach by the ACC for sure. And certainly for us of how we're invested in football and have had significant performance in football and expectations in football, we do anticipate to capture some of that, and that's the basis of the success initiatives. But so it's done to incentivize investment to create performance, and now that we're active in that and in running a budget and business in that. Eager to gain success within it, yeah.
And off of that, obviously this has been a crazy summer, even spring and summer with rumors. Every day, Clemson is headed here, Clemson's headed to the Big 12, Clemson's going to do this, Clemson's going to do that, but I get a feeling, and because we haven't talked to you, that's why I'm asking this, that whatever a next step is, whether that is staying in the ACC, getting more media rights money, whatever, that nothing's going to happen until this is adjudicated in a court of law. Is that fair to say?
There's plenty written, right? All the speculation, right? And read. Well, I don't know if I read all of it, but it's part of my job to be very engaged in. Sure, what's written, great, but more of the really where a lot of the moving parts and maybe conversations are nationally, and so we do that. And to answer your question, David, Not sure. Again, I'll kind of pass on the legal sequencing of that, only to say that we're going to continue to have our legal team work the legal process with it and act incredibly professional and be great members of the conference we're in and be really well read and connected nationally with all of the moving parts. However, those continue to show themselves. It has never been more active just with the national landscape of all the moving parts within college athletics. A lot of what I've talked about, not just specifically conference membership. So that's the A to B to C, David. Not sure we're going to continue to let the legal process play out. We're going to be great. We, Clemson, are going to be great members of the conference we're in. That's me. That starts with me, but all of our coaches and student athletes in institution, and also be really well read and engaged nationally. That's incredibly important.
Graham, transfers are obviously another big part of the picture. That players can go wherever they want, when they want, and when they decide. How has Clemson kind of just tried to direct coaches, or not direct coaches, but talk with coaches about keeping players engaged and having the things that make them want to stay and not go elsewhere? That's
right, Pete. I think it's a lot of it, a couple of ways to think about it. A lot of it does come back to some of our discussion with Will earlier of just the key foundational elements of college athletics that I'm biased, but I think Clemson, we invest, we position, we support our student athletes on the fields and off as good as anybody in the country, right? And our teams recruit to that, and we attract, right, the fit that of student athletes and staffs and programs. I just think is so unique and connected at Clemson. That being said, and I know there's stats out there that speak to our retention efforts for all of our sports, sure, not just football. And I think we index really well on some of those stats or the retention components because of a lot of things that I just talked about. But that being said, 21 sports with 16 different head coaches, there are different levels of status isn't the right word. each of our coaches are equipped and have a different vision and strategy for how they run their programs. And every sport's a little different, right? With calendar, with roster strategy and playing time, right? A lot of what you're speaking to, Pete. And, you know, and that's where I lean back to some of my early comments on our coaches and investment, continued investment, where we have great coaches that lead their programs incredibly well. That means competitively, but also ensure roster management and the vision and strategy that they have for where their programs are at. And so that shows itself very differently. And I would tell you that our head coaches group, I've talked on it a time or two here, we've set up, and it's very intentional from my lens, to have great collaboration and work and support, and camaraderie is a good word for that group. And they all do it a little different, right? They all manage their rosters, literally all of them. But I think they learn so much from each other, and there's a lot of synergy amongst that. And I've seen strategies kind of ported across sport, and I know that just comes from us being here at Clemson, the culture of our department, and really the culture of that head coaching group. So it's going to continue to evolve. It's evolved a lot in the last 3 years, 5 years, I guess, from a transfer deregulation, and we know that the model ahead is that's only going to look different.
You know, I've got to ask too. I mean, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of Clemson fans who are very passionate about football, who ask you, when is your football coach? Why can't we get transfers in like some of these other schools there? Have you ever talked with Dabo about that? Are you comfortable with how Dabo manages his roster and keeps players?
Couldn't be more convicted and supportive of Coach Sweeney, two-time national champion head coach, and how he has built his current program and where he's at, and let alone where his strategies and nimbleness, quite frankly, is ahead. And so, yeah, we talk about it, but in a supportive way, and a understanding vision and strategy, and how do we continue to be adaptable in a changing landscape. Sure, that means roster management, but that also means, or particularly means, a lot of the things that we've talked about. So absolutely, that's active engagement with me and Coach, but just in a very supportive, equipping him in particular, but the other 15 of our head coaches, and how they run their program and build their rosters.
Playing off of that, I know, I think Dave Doran and mentioned it, you know, they kind of went to an NFL model and how he's handled roster management. Alabama just hired basically a GM, if you will, to kind of help with theirs. Is this something you talked to Coach Sweeney about going forward, and as you kind of get more into the house stuff?
It is. Yeah, Will, it's a very active discussion in the industry, of course. And again, you talked on some of those moving parts. I know Coach Sweeney, I think at the beginning of camp, rolled out some of our staff and role duty changes within the football program. I anticipate those to continue to evolve, and us adding expertise and resources, whatever that may be, right? It's not, I'm not foretelling anything other than very active discussion. And sure, look into all aspects of how, quite frankly, outside of college athletics, to your point on the reference with pro sports, very active. So I know Jordan Sorrell's in our staff. We have great relationships and dialogue outside of even the college athletic space on that, and Coach Sweeney's very, very active in that. And again, back to Pete's question, my support, my connectivity with that to help understand and strategize, and then support on that is very active, and we're just kind of at the precipice of that while we're having to manage and again understand the direction with house case and timing and the uncertainty of the sequencing. So back to the airplane while you fly it, but us pulling in all different resources and structure and staff, right? Expect that to continue, and us to be very aggressive in how we invest and bring expertise and staff to do so.
I guess going back to the revenue generation piece, how aggressive do you feel like you guys can be? I mean, obviously you saw like Tennessee with the naming rights to their stadium. I mean, where are the opportunities, and kind of where do you see you going with that?
Yeah, the NCAA haven't deregulated the on-field football sponsorship regulations, I guess. And there may be more of those to come, right? I know a lot talk about, hey, what about jersey patches, and what's the next type of asset activation? Johnny, goes back to a lot of the dialogue, the alignment, the understanding, the importance that our trustees and President Clements has in the need to continue to position Clemson Athletics within the moving landscape. So that being said, we're going to continue to keep Clemson, the traditions, our values, and how we go about our business, so to speak. but absolutely the recognition and the assertiveness that we have to maximize where those opportunities or assets are is there. And so, yeah, does that mean some of the things that you ticked off? We're looking at that. We're looking at field sponsorship, naming rights, right, list goes on of things that we're looking at to maximize, but we're going to do it in a very thoughtful way to maximize revenue, to have it connect and be thoughtful with what works here at Clemson. And I think that Clemson Ventures, as we rolled out, is a testament or is a structure to do that in a really different way. And so, yeah, Tennessee's rolled out some stuff, and but as we roll out Clemson Ventures, I think there's going to be a lot of folks that look at, we saw what Clemson rolled out, so to speak. And that's not why we did it, but like that's an example to you, John, of us being aggressive and leading edge on maximizing opportunities for revenue in this changing space.
Sounds like it's really important for you guys to kind of not mess with the traditions too much if you don't have to, and how has that been in the conversations to make sure you're doing that?
Yeah, the fit, feel, great history and staff, and again up through our university board and president. So, yeah, Will, it's hard to maybe describe of the keep Clemson Clemson. It's that means something maybe a little different to all of us, but there's probably a lot of overlap of what that means to all of us too, and so that type of engagement, perspective. Engagement with the community, right? And this in IPTAY donors and student body, and so, but it's also it's nimble. It evolves, right? So there are the staple, the non-negotiable values, traditions, but then also how do we continue to hold those foundationally, but continue to adapt. Clemson University, let alone as athletics, has been first movers in innovations, one of our core values, in so many different things. We talked about IPTAY, the first athletics fundraising organization. When Vickery Hall was built in the late 80s, early 90s, Tim, that was one of the first athletic academic units, created entities. When we launched our creative solutions team and really leveraged and doubled down into our storytelling and content creation about a decade ago, we were one of the first movers of that. So there's certainly plenty of other examples, certainly our investment in facilities. And so we've been very early adopters in a lot of things while still keeping core our values and traditions. And so we're going to continue to have that mindset, that tact. Ventures is another example of that, and there'll be plenty of others that maybe they're transactional in nature, to your point, John, but they're also strategic in nature, Will, which is, I think, more where you're going.
Graham, we've heard a lot about private equity companies getting involved in conferences, in football teams, athletic programs. Has that been discussed here at Clemson, and does Clemson Ventures kind of maybe keep that from happening? How does that all fit into the Clemson plan?
It has been discussed. We have been very active or connected within that space, and just to be really well-read and understanding what opportunities there are, what strategies there are, pros and cons, right? So we've learned a lot in that space, and think for us it's incumbent for us to be very connected, very well-read, to position ourselves. Clemson Ventures is not created to be preventative to that. Quite frankly, it's done to help build a vehicle, an affiliated organization for us to be really assertive in opportunities to generate revenue and to position ourselves, our resources for our student athlete and growth and investment. So it's very active at many different levels, to your point, and we are certainly engaged with it, and it's my job to do so. How that looks and shows for Clemson in the future, really not sure, but it's something that we're very well read on.
The 110 Society was launched last November, I guess. How has it been performing since this launch, and is it where you guys want it to be?
Yeah, Derrian, it was last fall. The leadership of 110 Society, the connectivity with IPTAY from a fundraising and resource generation standpoint has been incredibly successful. How that engaged with our student athletes. We've tried to take a very efficient approach with that in the sense of how we fundraise and engage with it, because, right, quite frankly, the donors and supporters of most collectives, certainly ours and 110 Society, are the same, donors and supporters of IPTAY and of Clemson. And so it's the same ecosystem. And so we have IPTAY as staff members and development officers and our fundraising organization that are have these relationships, and we are able to help fundraise for dollars to go to Collective 110 Society. And so we've really leveraged, I hope our donors and fans, we're actually, this upcoming couple weeks, we're having a kind of another wave of outreach. Hope they feel that yes, while NIL dollars and collective dollars are separate, and so all funds and transactions go to 110 Society, but we are able to be, and we've been very intentional about being very efficient or aligned in how those asks and communications are. So it's evolved over even just the 8 months, 9 months that we relaunched or 110 was launched. I think it's been incredibly successful. It's shown itself by way of our roster builds for our student athletes and coaches, and we're going to continue to leverage 110 Society and NIL. So as much as I talk on Clemson Ventures and House Case and the future state of NIL is still being determined, and we're really eager to understand those rules and enforcement mechanisms. Feel like Clemson Ventures is created to be aggressive in what's intended to be a new NIL fair market value lens. Between now and then, our collective and 110 Society continues to be incredibly important. And so we're going to continue to message and fundraise and support 110 Society on behalf of our student athletes.
Been a lot of dirt moved around here the past 3, 4, 5 years in football and gymnastics and the wellness center on the Jervey renovation. Is there anything kind of in the works other than those once those get done to keep it going? There
is. It's a balance off of Pete's question earlier that it's, again, timeline or priorities are going to look different. Priorities as far as where dollars go, not necessarily what facility is a pecking order per se. Jeff and I, as we were kind of prepping for some of this, we were remarking that, gosh, probably in these type of season media availabilities, whether that's with myself or certainly Radakovich before, you know, the earlier on in the comments it was probably more facility updates. And now with all of the moving parts and probably call it other priorities or additional priorities that we have as a department, right, it probably doesn't get as much limelight, but we are going to continue to invest and have those. A couple things, David, to answer your question. Certainly I talked on earlier, the completion and opening of Jervey Volleyball and then our Watt Family Performance and Wellness Center that we're well aware of. We are through phase 1 approval, and we intend to come later this fall with phase 2 approval of our basketball operations expansion project, coming off of Little John Coliseum and the Swan Pavilion on behalf of our men's and women's basketball programs, and also with the gymnastics addition, who now they certainly use Little John. So that investment for basketballs, intend to continue to move that forward. Again, there'll be next actions on that later this fall. And then beyond that, revenue generating projects are going to be very important. So investment in Memorial Stadium. There's investment there for fan experience, for concessions, for restrooms, for sound and video board, right? So like those are going to be even more prominent and important of how we prioritize those. So that's a little bit of the perspective on it, David, but also some of the what's ahead and things that we're looking at and continuing to study.
In terms of the expenses, are you pretty confident you won't have to cut any sports in this new model? And I guess with Clemson Ventures, is that part of why, in terms of being able to generate enough money to have some of those Olympic sports?
A couple things, John. Yes, we don't intend to. We've looked at everything, and we'll continue to, but at this point, do not intend to alter our sport mix. Having just added 2 prominent, incredibly successful, heavily invested new sports, prominent women's sports, gymnastics and lacrosse. Love our ability to comprehensively invest. It comes back to this bottom of the pyramid that we're going to continue to invest across all of our sports and with our existing sports. That being said, yes, Clemson Ventures is, again, part of is in a very core way a strategic revenue generating entity. Therefore, to help generate revenue, to help us avoid or not pull levers on expense savings of things that maybe other schools have to more highly consider. All that to be said too, John, this gets back to President Clements and board, great support from our university. And that doesn't mean financially, that just means of like, hey, working through this, these new expenses, new collegiate model, together. And so the well-readiness of our campus leadership and partners and colleagues that I have, let alone our board and led by President Clements, that's a big part of the new model as well. And so I think that all that comes together for institutional decisions related to sport mix, et cetera. And so that is not an anticipatory action for us.
Something like 80% of Power 5 schools sell alcohol in football stadiums now. I think you guys are the one in the ACC that doesn't do it, not just for that, but across the board. Any thoughts on discussions on that? Or I guess if not, why is that an important thing for y'all to uphold?
Yeah, that's right, Chapel, and it's certainly it's something that we have talked, are talking about, but that's also that's an active answer, but it's also a retroactive answer. We've been talking about that. We've been assessing. We well know the marketplace. We know the dynamics with it, the revenue opportunities with it, how it would fit here at Clemson. So that's been a long type conversation, a long continual conversation, and it is certainly continual and active right now. And so again, well aware of national landscape and who does and doesn't and those type of things. There's decisions for Clemson, and yes, there's revenue generation needs, of course. There's fan experience opportunities. And so that's going to remain on our list, but it's been on the list for quite some time. And we'll continue to study it and see what becomes of it.
Grandma, it seems like an ultimate big picture question, but a lot of the things we've talked about are things that have happened and how the school's going to deal, how your athletic department's going to deal with it. What do you think we're going to be talking about in college athletics 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we meet here? This is a constantly changing situation, as we know. I mean, how's the landscape going to be so much different down the road?
That is a real big picture, and gosh, the crystal ball. It's funny if you think that question, Pete. If we rewind back 5 years, gosh, I don't know that anybody would have licked the crystal ball of exactly how it looks now. Listen, the continued focus and value of brands, of competitive success, of sports properties. This is kind of a professional lens, but also in college, there continues to be seemingly more value, more commercial value, sure media value, right? With all the with your big valued brands, and so for us at Clemson, we view ourselves to be that, and we've continued for decades. Let alone certainly with football is on the leading edge of that. So therefore, a little bit back to some of your prior questions of like investment and how the model's changing and how we're managing the business and expenses. But also, I can forecast in 5 years that there's going to be even more incumbency to have great brand equity and value, and that means on the fields and off. And so how we make decisions to continue to invest in athletics on behalf of the university and how we manage a growing industry of sports and entertainment in American higher education, that's what's being stressed right now more than ever. I expect that in 5 years to be even more stressed. And so therefore for us, the importance of athletics for our university to continue to invest and have great brand value and have a well-run business and keeping the traditions and keeping Clemson is the mix. So I hope I'm not ducking your question. I'm not. It's just that's a really broad answer to a really broad question. Yeah.
Graham, do you worry about fans becoming disillusioned with the business of football and athletics as opposed to just coming out on Saturdays?
Sure. Yeah, that's a well-phrased question, and I do, right? And it comes back to a little bit of, Will, you were talking on, hey, what's our marketing to our IPTAY donors, and I kind of go back to this pyramid and the foundational piece that call it disillusion, call it professionalization of college sports, right? I know there's plenty of buzzwords and things written about how the game is changing. But at the end of the day, I couldn't be more convicted. I know our university is, our coaching staff, Coach Sweeney has conviction on, it's still about education. And this is American higher education. It's scholastic in nature. It's scholarships. It's support for our student athletes at developmental operative ages of 18 to 22. And so that obligation that we have to continue to invest in those fundamentals of college athletics, to me, remains unchanged, so to speak, or non-negotiable as it relates to it being a foundation. But we got to be really adaptive to how the game is changing and how our fans or our consumers, so to speak, react to that. It is very different, but demographics continue to change, how we continue to position Clemson to still withhold the values and traditions of Clemson and college athletics, but also be really nimble and aggressive within the changing landscape is the needle to thread.
Got time for one or two more?
Erik Bakich's name was kind of a hot name and a rumor after the season ended, I guess. For you guys to give him you guys agreeing on an extension, I guess, was that kind of because his name was considered in that pool, or was it always in the works?
It was, there was, how do I answer this, Derrian? It was a very proactive approach. There was Erik's name was very active a year ago, and it was this past year, and it will continue to be. Erik is a young coach, so to speak, but incredibly successful a coach at Clemson in his 2 years here, let alone before. As he's returned to Clemson, he and his family, I feel like there isn't a better fit for Clemson baseball than Erik Bakich, and I know Erik feels that way about his family in Clemson. So, Derrian, yes, Erik's name and the discussions and dialogue that he and I had during that time period were very active, and you have a sense of that. But a lot of those conversations he and I had well before and are iterative, and so there was never a concern of a fire drill or an issue. Erik was very forthright and just candid about how he saw himself in Clemson baseball and his family, as was I, as how we viewed Erik and his family and his leadership at Clemson baseball. So very excited to have the new contract support for Erik. That matters, but also there's such a fit there with him mutually that it's incumbent on us to continue to support him in the baseball program. But I feel like that's going to provide great success for years to come.
Some of the logistical preparations you're getting in place for the idea of Clemson maybe hosting the college football playoff first round game, and how much that impacts, obviously, in a smaller city, everything that goes into that.
Well, the 4 games, 4 first round games, one on Friday, December 20th, I believe it, 21st maybe is the Friday, and then the 22nd is Saturday. 20th and 21st is a Friday, Saturday. We have commencement on Thursday, December 19th. We also have the athletic director's birthday on December 19th. So there's a lot going on in that. But yeah, so Chapel, we've had a lot of, really this goes back to a year and a half ago, while the structure and the timing was rolling out. So we've had a lot of internal discussions on that with IPTAY, with our season ticket holder interface, certainly operations with campus connectivity, right? Commencement there is Friday. That brings a lot of hotels and celebration and families and end of the semester. And now there's basketball schedule, is going to be rolled out, and there's going to be, men's and women's basketball around that time. So we have done a lot of in-office work and prep. We have saved that, so to speak, for any of our donor ticket interface work, probably until as we get into the season a little bit. And so we have would anticipate sometime in the middle of fall, should that be something that would maybe show itself as an option, that we'll certainly get ahead of it with our fans for education and information and ticket details, et cetera. So we're prepped to do that. There'll just be a time and a place that we hope is coming sooner than later.
Yeah. Talk about building the plane while you're flying. I guess, what are the biggest pieces in terms of the house settlement you're still trying to figure out? Is it the Title IX piece? Is it who exactly will forward the money to the players, whether it's the conference or the school? Like, what are all the discussions at this point?
Yeah, there's plenty. John, I'll answer your question with a couple of direct components. One is certainly the distribution, our affordability, our investment, so to speak, from a scholarship deregulation, more scholarships, getting back to the bottom of the pyramid. And so that we look to affect and invest with all of our sports in that manner. But the specifics of that, the roster management of that, you were kind of talking on the 105 a little bit, and the ability for our coaches to manage our current roster, manage roster transitions, while knowing that they're going to have more scholarships to recruit to. And they're recruiting, right, college recruiting it's a little different timing for all the sports, but many of our sports, they're recruiting current freshmen and sophomores, so to speak, or camps and things like that. And so, they're already thinking, our coaches are already thinking to rosters that are for the 26 and 7 season, which would be in a different roster or scholarship allocation, but also we don't exactly know where those land. So that type of, okay, where the finality of the settlement, but then really how we're able to offer more of the scholarships to all of our sports, that's a big focus. And then the second one is, or second priority amongst many, is the NIL enforcement structure and fair market value, clearinghouse, commercially focused intention of NIL in a post-house world. And so ergo, we're building Clemson Ventures, and we're building an in-house agency to help us position and facilitate and create those opportunities for when that is intended to be really true NIL is the phrase in the settlement, and an enforcement mechanism and structure around it. And so we are building our agency for that to be the NIL circumstance ahead. Now, how that evolves and how the structure and how the external agencies that are intended to help manage and report and enforce that, there's a lot of focus on that we want to be really active and engaged with, but have some focus on how that evolves.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Coming up on 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Thanks, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
huddling.
Thank you.
for listening.
Thank you.